The old man sat quietly in the defendant's chair, his worn suit pressed but decades old. 3 small medals pinned to his chest caught the courtroom's fluorescent light. Judge Harrison looked down from his bench with barely concealed irritation and said the words that would end his career. "Remove those fake medals before you speak in my courtroom." What happened next silenced everyone in the room and reminded a nation what honor truly means. The courthouse was unusually packed that Tuesday morning, not because of the case itself, a simple property dispute, but because word had spread quietly through town. Word that a man, the man, was going to testify. He had walked in without fanfare, no lawyer by his side, no family, just modest posture, worn black shoes, and that faded blue blazer that seemed older than some of the attorneys in the room. The medals on his chest weren't pinned with showmanship. They simply were there, steady, silent, absolute. A silver star, a bronze star with V device and a purple heart. Most people had never seen them in person, but Judge Harrison didn't look impressed. But what was truly shocking was what those medals represented. Judge Harold Harrison was known for his discipline, for his contempt of theatrics, and most of all, for his intolerance of anything that didn't fit into his vision of a courtroom. He had climbed the ladder through ambition, not military service. When he entered from his chambers, stiff and unsmiling, his eyes immediately locked onto the only thing in the room that bothered him, the medal on that man's chest. He waited for the moment the veteran would be called to the stand so he could assert control. The bailiff called, "Mr. Joseph Emery, please take the stand." The room grew quieter than it should have. Each step toward the witness chair felt like a procession. The old man didn't look around, didn't acknowledge whispers. He just stepped forward and stood. That's when Judge Harrison leaned forward and said it. "Before you begin, remove those medals." This is a courtroom, not a parade ground. There was a pause, the kind that stretches through bone. Someone gasped. A lawyer shifted uneasily. Joseph didn't respond immediately. He just looked at the judge with exhausted, heavy eyes. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Because at that moment, someone in the back of the courtroom began to stand up. The judge, unused to silence, repeated himself. "I said remove the medals, Mr. Emery, or you will not be permitted to speak." Joseph's hand slowly reached for his silver star. The courtroom watched, breathless, as decades of service were quietly unpinned and placed on the wooden ledge beside the microphone. But from the very back of the courtroom, a man in full military dress uniform rose to his feet. His chest was heavy with ribbons, his bearing unmistakable. He had remained still throughout the proceedings until this moment. Then slowly, with purpose, he stepped forward and spoke 4 words that stopped the room cold. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The man's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried like authority does, not through volume, but through weight. The courtroom turned in unison. He wore formal army dress uniform with perfect creases, polished shoes, and among his medals sat the unmistakable blue ribbon of the Medal of Honor. Judge Harrison, caught off guard, leaned forward. "This is a court of law. Unless you've been subpoenaed." "I am General Marcus Thorne," the man interrupted quietly, "and I have a right to address this room when a decorated hero is humiliated on the stand." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What you're seeing now is nothing, because General Thorne was about to reveal something that would destroy the judge's career forever. General Thorne stepped forward, each boot echoing on the tile floor. "Your Honor, the man you just ordered to remove his medals is Master Sergeant Joseph Francis Emery. He served 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Iraq. Those medals aren't decorations. They're grave markers that happen to shine. The general's voice filled every corner of the courtroom. That silver star was earned when Sergeant Emery carried 4 wounded soldiers through enemy fire for 2 miles. That bronze star with V device was earned when he held a position alone for 6 hours while his unit evacuated civilians. That Purple Heart represents blood he shed for people he never met. Judge Harrison's face had drained of color. General Thorne continued, "I was a young lieutenant in Vietnam when Sergeant Emery saved my life and the lives of my entire platoon. We were surrounded, cut off, and he single-handedly held off an enemy assault until reinforcements arrived." The courtroom was dead silent. Not even breathing could be heard. "Your Honor." The general's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "You just ordered a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient to remove his medals because you thought they looked fake. But this was exactly when everything changed completely. Because Joseph slowly stood up and revealed something that nobody in that courtroom expected. Joseph stood, walked to where his medals lay on the wooden ledge, and picked up the silver star. But instead of putting it back on, he held it out toward Judge Harrison. "Your Honor," Joseph said quietly, "this medal doesn't make me better than anyone in this room. It just reminds me of the men who didn't come home to receive theirs." He turned to face the courtroom. "But what you did today wasn't about medals or courtroom procedure. It was about respect, and respect isn't something you can order someone to remove." Judge Harrison tried to speak, but no words came out. General Thorne stepped beside Joseph. "Every person in this room should understand what just happened. This man served his country for 30 years. He earned these medals in blood and sacrifice. And today, in an American courtroom, he was told his service was fake." The general turned to address the entire courtroom. "Sergeant Emery never asked for thanks, never demanded recognition, never used his service for personal gain. He came here today as a citizen, like any other, to give testimony. And he was humiliated for wearing the medals he earned protecting our freedom." The truth was, this was only the beginning of Judge Harrison's downfall. Joseph pinned his silver star back to his jacket and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I've served in countries where judges were tools of oppression. I never thought I'd see the day when an American judge would use his power to humiliate a veteran for wearing medals earned in service to this country." One by one, people in the courtroom began to stand. First the veterans in the gallery, then the police officers, then the court staff. They stood in silent respect for Joseph and silent condemnation of the judge's actions. Judge Harrison's hands trembled as he reached for his gavel, but before he could speak, the courtroom doors opened again. This time, it was a woman in a dark suit, the State Judicial Conduct Commissioner. "Your Honor," she said formally, "these proceedings are suspended pending a full investigation into judicial misconduct." The commissioner had been called by someone in the courtroom who had live-streamed the entire exchange. Within minutes, the video had gone viral. By the end of the day, Judge Harrison's judicial career was over. General Thorne escorted Joseph from the courtroom as a crowd of supporters gathered outside. News crews arrived, but Joseph walked past them all without a word. He had said what needed to be said. But the most shocking part came 3 days later. 3 days later, the newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "The Judge and the Hero." But the real shock wasn't the judge's resignation or the national outrage. It was what they discovered when they researched Joseph Emery's full military record. The Silver Star was just the beginning. Joseph had earned every major combat decoration short of the Medal of Honor. He had served in 3 wars, completed over 200 combat missions, and saved dozens of lives. His classified record, when declassified for the story, showed a level of heroism that read like fiction. But Joseph had never spoken about any of it. He had returned home, worked as a mechanic for 40 years, raised a family, and lived quietly. The only time he wore his medals was to formal occasions where military dress was appropriate, like court testimony where his credibility was at stake. Judge Harrison, meanwhile, faced federal civil rights charges for violating Joseph's constitutional rights. His pension was revoked, his law license suspended, and he became a cautionary tale taught in judicial ethics classes. The courtroom where it all happened now displays a plaque, in honor of all veterans who served with dignity and honor, even when that honor was questioned. And Joseph? He returned to his quiet life, but with one difference. Schools across the state began inviting him to speak to students about service and sacrifice. He would tell them the same thing every time. These medals don't make me special. They remind me that freedom isn't free, and respect must be earned every single day. The last surprise came 6 months later when Joseph received a letter from a young law student named Harrison, Judge Harrison's son. The letter was an apology for his father's actions and a promise to honor veteran service when he became a lawyer. Joseph wrote back, "Your father made a mistake, but that doesn't define who you are. Make sure your generation does better. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a gavel. Sometimes it comes from the quiet dignity of those who refuse to be broken, even when power tries to bend them. And sometimes, the most important lessons are learned not in law school, but from 82-year-old mechanics who wear their medals only when they must, and carry their honor always."